Fire and Ice open a hair salon and drown in references to outdated internet jokes. Get ready for flossing and for Fire and Ice to be called a couple of Karens. It's Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville issue number 1. And I do have to spotlight this one variant cover where it's homaging the classic JLI run. Just gonna throw that out there. It is nice. It's very nice. Now this series is currently slated to be a mini-series time recording, and it had a lead up as a backup story in the Power Girl special, which we discussed at length on this channel. The Power Girl special, that is, not this backup. I'll link it down below. As for the lead up story, you don't really need to read it to jump into this one. They recap it enough in this first issue that you can figure it out, but it does add some context and of course lets you know upfront what the tone is, and that is comedic. This series is very much leaning into the concept of fire and ice as conceptualized during the Wahaha era of the Justice League, or perhaps a little later even, more in the 2000s. But mostly it's working with the idea that they are comedic characters, and that's very much the lens through which they're presented here, and their other traits or attributes are more reduced to background qualities. Now, their time in the Justice League International, while it did have a strong comedic slant, was still wrapped in the overall genre of superherodom, and the comedy and slice of life were accents, sometimes strong/heavy accents, but the main genre held. Here, right off the bat, it's a bit of a reversal. The comedy element first and foremost before anything else, slice of life underneath that, and superheroing dead last. But this comic is upfront about it, so it's not a surprise, but just note that going in. And even with all that laid bare, there are still some interesting choices that happen even inside of that framework. Also, the initial 80s run of both JLI and when it switched over to being the JLA are more serious than people give them credit for being. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's chat Fire and Ice. As a fan of the Bwahaha era of the Justice League, or I just like to call it the Justice League International era because there was more to it than bwahaha, I wanted to check this out. Now, as far as characters go, Fire has been around longer than Ice. Beatriz Costa debuted in 1979 in Super Friends number 25, created by E. Nelson Bridwell and Ramona Fradon. She was presented as a powerful and competent Brazilian superheroine and contender for manager of Wayne Industries' Brazilian branch. But her backstory would be retconned post-Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985 to being an amateur model and showgirl, but also secret agent for the Brazilian government and a member of the Global Guardians. And it's while she's an agent that she gets her powers. Ice, originally going by Ice Maiden, you do see her go by that name, although Ice Maiden is also another character, now Glacier. The Tora version of the character was introduced in Justice League International number 12 in 1988. She was created by Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, and Kevin Maguire. Tora Olafsdotter entered the scene at the behest of Fire. The two are part and parcel in the mind of many fans who are aware of them because they're introduced together and they do a lot of things together. They have distinct looks that contrast but are also complementary to each other in terms of color scheme, and their personalities play the same way. The fiery, passionate, Fire, and the quieter, more demure Ice. It was a fun dynamic. Now, of course, they're having crises and the like in between, but for the most part, their backstories have held, and they are lightly referenced in Fire and Ice number 1, Welcome to Smallville, but that will matter both less and more than you think. I'll have quotes later. This story is by Joanne Starrer, the art is by Natasha Bustos, who also does the inks, and colors are by Tamara Bondolin. We pick up with the woman in Smallville, where they were headed after the backup in Power Girl. In that, they were attempting to stop a natural disaster, but it goes awry because Fire starts fighting with Guy Gardner when he showed up to help, but accidentally nearly hurts Tora. This resulted in Superman having to show up and break up the fight. And a couple of things happened here. One, it showcased and threw back to Ice's crush on Superman. Nice reference, not often remembered. She used to have a thing for Superman real bad. But it's also the start of something that could be make or break for certain fans, and that is the characterization of Fire. Let me guess, you're not mad, you're just disappointed.
Fire, I'm not your father. I didn't come here to punish you, I came to help.
We didn't ask for help, not from him, and not from you.
I know it can be hard to accept assistance, to say you can't do it alone, but you put them all in danger. Is your ego more important than their lives?
I'm sure some of them can hear this conversation, Clark, and I'm sure some of them are recording it. Stop. The depiction of Fire in these issues thus far is interesting. She's written almost as an offshoot or female variant of Booster Gold, obsessed with her image and fame and proving herself. Her secret agent backstory is essentially ignored. Here's how they describe themselves. You haven't heard of me? Well, that's embarrassing for you. I used to be a model, obviously, but when I gained superpowers, I found my true calling, international fame. Oh, and the ability to help people. The Justice League didn't always see my full potential, but Ice has been by my side through everything. It's time for the world to see what we're truly capable of. I'm done being underestimated. Oh, no one really wants to hear about me, do they? I grew up the princess of a magical Norwegian tribe, became a superhero, and then actually died for a bit. That was strange, but it's all given me perspective on what's really important in life. I'm so grateful to have the second chance. Each day is a gift, and I get to share it with my best friend. Now, Fire always had an ability to market herself, an awareness of herself, an assertiveness, a confidence. But in these stories, it ends up being warped and twisted to vapidness and an aggressive level of selfishness, and also a massive chip on her shoulder. It doesn't quite match her past characterizations and can come across, for those more familiar with her, as quite jarring. Especially because there are quotes and tweets hearkening back to the jail I run. Now, this is going to be a very mild may vary thing, because one may not be familiar with those past characterizations, and if that's the case, this is going to be the first introduction, and so it may not come across that way. She may still come across as unlikable or not, that's going to vary. Or there may be some who are just willing to accept this as a new take, so just new slate, dawn of DC. It's even on the banner. Now, while the women were initially going to stay at Clark's parents' farmhouse, where he sends all his wayward friends and family and responsibilities he doesn't feel like dealing with, they instead have a change of plans. Now they're staying at a hair salon. It's called the Big T's, but they're not just staying there, but they're also gonna run it, and it was apparently the only rental. Why? Because shenanigans. They're there with a robot, Elron, which is a throwback reference. It's a Scientology joke as well. There are lots of little references and jokes and wordplay throughout all of this. You saw it with the Big T's. But they don't come together in a cohesive tone, and instead it has the energy of watching one of those zany spoof films where something funny, in quotes, is happening all the time. Sometimes so relentlessly it fails to land. It's an art to master that level of constant zany. Or not even zany, just everything being a joke. It can be done, but it can be difficult to accomplish without coming across as grating or try hard. The thing is, if this tone works for you, this comic is going to be a breath of fresh air, a slice of life adventure between two superhero gal pals. If not, it's going to prove frustrating and potentially underwhelming. Or meh. Meh is always an option for anything. I think this could be good for us, B. A new home, a fresh start. And we might not be so bad at this salon thing. With your background in fashion and I didn't bust my ass for all these years to just sit back and run a salon. Ah yes, running a salon. Truly the sit back and relax professions, right up there with restaurant. This is one of those moments where it's unclear if this is meant to be a joke. Since Fire is so abrasive overall, it could be meant or taken seriously, and it doesn't ingratiate her towards the audience. This is how we're going to finally make a name for ourselves. This is how we're going to get the respect we deserve. Do people not respect them? Because that's a core thesis that runs through this issue. The idea that they are just viewed as a joke by the superhero community, and then in a meta way also by readers at large. Is that the case? Is that how they're viewed? Let me know how you viewed them, and if you would agree with that assessment, or if that feels like returning them to a past point that was either very short or never truly was. Now, there are some solid canonical nods here, just to what's going on in DC time of recording. It's referenced and explained why Fire and Ice still know who Clark is, despite his identity not being public knowledge anymore. It's a nice nod that makes the universe overall feel more intertwined. It's noted and appreciated. There are also editor's notes, and they're accurate. This issue will not lie to you like Punchline the Gotham game number 5. I'm not over it. So Ice wants to settle down and figure out just what they're doing. And Fire wants to summon bad guys to them, to this small town, to fight them to gain street cred. Also, they need to run the salon, I guess. Why? Why did they have to open the salon? And that means it's time to enter Tamarind. Yes, Tamarind. I hope it's a more common name that I'm aware of, like how people are named Cherry or Rosemary or Brie, because otherwise it's potentially slightly questionable. It is there is a joke, a food joke. She's not the only character with a food joke in her name, because some of the other characters introduced will have that as well. But back to Tamarind. She's 19 years old and she does it all. Hair, makeup, nails, and she wants to work for them because she worked for the past owner who died, or as she says, kicked the bucket. Now she's willing to start today. And Ice just hires her without talking to Fire and then just walks away and leaves with Martha to go have pie. This scene left me with a lot of questions, such as who's paying her? She said she didn't come cheap, and how are they paying her? Because it's mentioned that they needed to get a cosign for the lease to this place. Then it's also said that Fire used all of her savings. It's one of those things where those details are added because there still needs to be an in-universe flow to the facts that are presented, even if the tone is overall humorous. Just because things are wacky or silly doesn't mean they don't need to be grounded in the rules of the universe as presented, not leave gaps for people to fall into. That could either pull focus from them or result in the humor not landing. Anyway, here's a song joke. Tam is back, back again. Tam is back. Get that bread. Who are you and why are you singing Eminem?
Who are you and what is Eminem?
Hold on. I'm speechless. I'm actually speechless. I've read this several times, and every time this happens to me when I get to this scene. I imagine if you don't know that song, Eminem being referenced won't help you, and it will just fall flat. But also, does she know the song, but not that Eminem sang it? I'm falling into a rabbit hole. It's also a very dated reference. Although, with the changes in how trends proliferate, sometimes older things can come back around, like the resurgence of Zoolander or the Forrest Gump shrimp meme, or how books can now become popular years later through proliferation on TikTok. The landscape of the world is ever changing, ever shifting. I'm also worried about Tamarin because she's the only person working here, and I imagine that once word gets out that two super hot superheroines have opened a salon where you can come and get looks, maybe you can even come and get their look, it's gonna be so busy. Please hire more people to help Tamarin. I hope it's you is just them hiring people so that she has people to work with her, because I am stressed for her. I'm also pretty sure she's not gonna be paid. Nobody took her information or anything. Now, Ice went out with Martha, and there's some talk about how she's not sure what she wants to do. It's a nice moment, but it's interrupted by yet another side character. This time the waitress, Raquel Rhodes, or Rocky as she likes to be called. Do you get it? And then we're back to the internet jokes. Girl, you are blowing up. What is happening? I've been tagged on Waynebook, Pixtagram, My Place? Lord, who still uses My Place? Fire. Fire's ad or video promo that she puts on My Place is pure cringe. In all fairness, I think this sequence is meant to elicit that response, and if so, extremely well played. We have jokes like it being poorly filmed and her yelling about that she has 3 chins. They have Ice not being there, so they hold up an embarrassing photo of her in the frame. They have a prolonged sequence of them flossing. Now, if this is meant to be a wow, Fire is out of touch, that's pretty clever and funny. However, there are other out-of-date references made by the supposedly hip characters that draw that into question, such as after Tamarin films the attack by King Shark, who responds to this ad because Fire put #Smallville in the video, she's asked by Fire if she was filming her and Ice fighting, because Ice was disappointed in Fire because of this, obviously. It was a poor life choice. And then Tamarin asks, why would she bother filming a couple of Karens? It's not even accurate use of the word Karen. Tamarin's 19. She should be using it properly. Fire even fires back that she can't be a Karen, but anybody can be a Karen. At this point, Karen is more a philosophy, a way of being, like being a beige Becky or something. It's for everyone. Now, Superman has to come in to deal with this again, and things get odd. Seriously, let a girl live, Soups. What talks? Release what talks? He disrespected me.
I meant no disrespect. I'm only here to help.
And again, we didn't ask for it.
Respectfully, you needed it.
Did we? Or are you big, strong men just desperate to jump in and save us before we have a chance to save ourselves?
I feel like I was accosted. Where did that come from?
And even if one wanted to address that as part of why Fire is feeling resentful, it just hits you like a freight train out of nowhere in the way it's presented in this context. For this to fly, one needs to buy into Fire being at a near sociopathic level of indifference. People could have died. The humor is getting to the point where the verisimilitude is being broken, or at least very severely pushed upon. And that makes it less funny than if it was pulled back just a bit. For example, this entire thing could still play out. Fire could still be chafing under these small town rains, but she's with Ice because Ice wants to take up Clark's offer to slow down and find herself. Clark's parents cannot have had room to take on lodgers because they have lives. And he also needs to just stop dumping people on them, which could have been played as a joke and given a clear reason as to why the location was changed. Now, as for the salon, it can be added that they have to run the salon. That's part of the lease. That's the only way they could get this place. It would be flimsy, but again, it would be an explanation. Now they have a reason for Tamarin to show up and a mutual need to hire her. She, being a 19-year-old, could be thrilled to be working with some superheroes, even if they are allegedly washed up, and so films them to promote the salon and drum up business. Boom! Now a villain can show up. You can have even the same villain show up, and Fire can be excited because something is happening. She can actually do something. And now we're back at the same place without making Fire so grotesquely irresponsible. And Ice can still be upset because it's like she can't escape this persona. And you can still add in all the shark jokes and all of the other things. You could even add in some of the ad not being the best ad. You could film like one of those TikTok videos where it's people reacting to reactions, like 3 reactions layered on top of each other. Although all of this begs the question, why buy the salon in your superhero identities and not your civilian ones? And to that, I've got nothing. The armchair editing hasn't got there yet. Fire now refuses to speak to Ice. She's upset with Ice for saying that she may be done with this lifestyle. And then she claims that Ice abandoned her and well, she has a 12-month lease and they just need to deal with it. And then there's a Salt Bae reference. And even if part of the play on words with the Salt and Lot's wife is kind of clever, it's still a very out-of-date thing to include. It really calls into question the jokes about Fire being out of date when some of the overall reference internet jokes are also, in internet terms at least, out of date. Unless the joke is just remember Salt Bae was a thing, or just an attempt to infuse some digital reference points into the story as a whole. But things move so fast on here, especially since the proliferation of TikTok. It's like every week there's something new. Keep up. If you can, if you dare. Also, I thought people were done with Salt Bae because his prices were so outrageous and he snuck in and stole a moment with that trophy and he wouldn't let an actual winner's kid touch it. I threw down a challenge to the entire world claiming I could beat anyone, but was humiliated by a grown man in red panties. They're trunks. And you should know that because you worked with him. Then I was abandoned by my best friend. Maybe the only true friend I've ever known. And now I'm stuck here because I sunk all my savings into this relic. So what's so important? Regaining my dignity. But why neither one of you wanted the salon? Maybe it'll be addressed later on in the miniseries and secretly one of them really wanted the salon and then upon a reread all of this will slot in better. But as it stands, the emotional depth is lacking. Because she caused this entirely herself. This isn't a nuanced argument. B is in the wrong and she endangered lives and ignored Ice's feelings and walked all over her and is now icing her out. Anyway, she calls Ambush Bug and says she'll pay him to come down and she can beat him up, which did lead to a response that made me laugh, personally. Lady, I'd pay you for that. And there's a nice Big Belly Burger reference. Also gotta spotlight the punch him in the nose joke from when King Shark shows up. Some nice Animal Planet humor there. Overall, this issue could have been a lot stronger with some tightening. Now there are some who are just not going to be happy with the premise overall and others who it's going to land for, but even with the premise as is, it could have used just a few tweaks, another pass, just some shoring up of details and rationales, and that could also have helped strengthen the characterization on Fire's part. A bit more time and room for some serious moments. Even if a work is comedic, it doesn't mean that everything said or every moment and everything in the background has to be a joke. There were a couple of slivers of moments in this that weren't, but they were so brief and they didn't really get a chance to breathe. There are some fun and funny ideas here, and the overall tone is well intended, not mean-spirited towards the characters, although Fire is straddling, but that doesn't seem to be intentional. Since people's humor gauges vary so much, I can see some really enjoying this as a fun, relaxing romp. Just a nice, light, fluffy read. While for others, I can see it being off-putting or disappointing. For many reasons. One may even be that once more a superhero outing for females isn't being treated seriously, and the characters are not being treated as mature, fully fledged superheroines. It also appears that this was meant more as a fresh start, and any detail is being held onto it for convenience rather than clarity. I have quotes that the author gave in response to a question being asked about how fans were responding to the knowledge that Tora was going to have some of her backstory intact and that they were excited about it. Starrer stated, "I honestly didn't even think about it in terms of keeping her original story. I had a chance to kind of restart these characters, and so I thought about the most essential versions of them. Ice being a princess feels like a core part of her personality. Being both royalty and coming from this lost tribe, it makes her a bit sheltered, a bit naive. She's less worldly than Fire and more trusting because of it." There's not much talk of Fire's backstory, but the question first one wasn't about fire. But there was a lot of talk about what was planned for the series. Romance, so much romance, Lobo romance, get hype. And there were also some interesting statements made about the original run. Once more, the author stated, "My hope, if I've done my job right, is that they'll be surprised, the reader, by how much it feels like the old Justice League International books, while still being new and accessible. I've tried extremely hard to put all my love and passion for the Giffen, DeMatteis, Maguire series into this, to give it the heart and comedy that those stories had. But you can absolutely pick this up if you don't know anything about Fire and Ice. It's pretty simple. One has fire powers and one has ice powers. They're best friends, and now they're in Smallville starting their lives over." Just in general, this is just a question. Perhaps it would be easier if one were allowed to play more in the idea that you could bring more stuff from the past forward and that readers wouldn't be turned off and that they would figure it out. If the story is interesting enough and they like the characters enough, some extra details about their past will be exciting and interesting and not off-putting. It's very difficult to do both of, oh, it's for people who read all of the past issues, but also for people who never read anything. When one tries to do that, sometimes it can end up being something for neither. Also, then she gets excited about the fact there's a character called Smarty Pants in number 2, and they also showcase his picture in number 1. Am I coming back for Smarty Pants? I don't know. This seems like a good place to toss the question back out to you. Do you feel that this issue achieved the tone of the original JLI books? I reread my trades after Ice shows up, and then also some of the mid-2000s stuff formerly known as Justice League and the like. For me, the issues so far were closer to the latter than the former. But you might disagree, and if so, I want to hear why. I just want to talk about this with you. Is the tone on point? Is this exactly the type of series you want for Fire and Ice? Do you like these just small kind of comedic forays and getting to explore these side characters and more B and C-list characters again, and you'll take it? Because if this sounds like it's up your alley, you should check it out. If enough people do, there can be even more series like this or more Fire and Ice. And hey, ambush bug sighting. That's exciting. The creators seem earnest and the comic was upfront with its tone. It could just have used some tweaks and more adherence to character bibles to make it the best version of itself that it could be. But those are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. Please share them down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. This was not meant to be this long, but it happened, and that's okay. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.